Chag Purim Sameach, and welcome to my first podcast. This is Rabbi Dr. Sid Vineburg, and today we're going to be talking about the origin of the Jewish holiday of Purim. Purim is a rabbinic holiday. It is not found in the Torah, but its roots are very much found in the early part of the history of the Jewish people. Like Star Wars, when we read the book of Esther, we're actually looking at the third installment of a saga that has gone on for thousands of years. This saga begins in the book of Exodus. If we look at Exodus chapter 17, verse 14, we will see a description of the Amalekites. Now, the Amalekites were a nomadic people. They were mercenary, and they attacked the children of Israel by ambush from behind. Now, that was considered a war crime. The soldiers, the strong men, always worked in front of the group as they were moving through the desert. In the back were the elderly, the children, the women, those who were not considered eligible to fight. It is those that were attacked by the Amalekites first. And so after a lengthy battle, they are cursed by God. And we see that in the passage from Exodus. And the Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in the book and rehearse it in the years of Joshua. For I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called the name of it Adonai Misi. And he said, the hand upon the throne of the Lord will make war with Amalek from generation to generation. So we learn from this that the defeat of Amalek was not complete, and that at some time in the future, God would revisit this tribe and bring upon it destruction for the crimes that Amalek had committed. We turn our attention now to much later in Jewish history. The children of Israel have come to the land, and they are now settled. The time of the judges is about to pass. Samuel is the last of the judges, and he crowns Saul, the Benjaminite, from the tribe of Benjamin, the son of Kish, as the king over Israel. In chapter 15 of the book of 1 Samuel, we find that Saul's first order of business is to go after the Amalekites and destroy them completely. They are to leave nothing. All is to be destroyed. They're not even to keep the livestock or the gold and silver or any of the possessions of the Amalekites. Those are considered to be in cherem. Cherem means that they are forbidden. This is a war at the behest of God, and no one should enrich themselves from it, because then the other nations would assume that it was only done in order to steal the possessions of the Amalekites. Saul goes to war with Amalek, and at the end of the war, most of the Amalekites are dead. However, breaking God's commandment, he gives the cows to his soldiers. and he keeps alive the king of the Amalekites, whose name is Agag, Agag. Sometime between the time that Saul captures Agag and Samuel kills him in fulfillment of the Lord's command, Agag manages to impregnate a woman, keeping alive the Amalekites. Saul, because he did not blot out the Amalekites, loses the kingship, and it is given to one considered better than him, King David, whose family will now reign over the Israelites from David's own time through the Messianic age. Saul loses his kingdom, and later in a battle with the Philistines, he and his son Jonathan lose their lives. The house of Saul is disgraced. The royal banner is removed from them, and any remaining children of Saul become regular citizens of the country. We now move to the book of Esther. The book of Esther takes place during the time of the Persians, during the king Ahasuerus, who is better known in historical texts as Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes had both a winter and summer palace. The summer palace was in Shushan, where the story takes place. His wife Vashti was a political marriage, and although the book of Esther tells us that she was deposed, it is simply possible that she was put into exile rather than killed. Coming from a noble family, she probably had quite a bit of money, and her family had quite a bit of influence. So we know a little bit about the story. Ahasuerus has won a great battle, his kingdom is secure, and he decides to have a year-long feast in Shushan, the summer palace. He requires that his wife Vashti come to him, and according to Jewish tradition, although it is not spoken of in the book, she is to come to him not wearing any clothing. This is a great insult to her and her family, and she refuses. Her refusal causes Ahasuerus to have great anger. He deposes Vashti and seeks to find a new queen. And so we have what is essentially the Miss America contest of Persia. Each night, a new virgin would be brought to Ahasuerus, and by the next morning, this virgin would become part of Ahasuerus's harem, where they would live their lives very contented, according to Jewish tradition. We have an interruption in the text to tell us a little bit about two other characters that are going to be central to our story. Ahasuerus is looking for a wife. It turns out that one of the Jewish maidens in Shushan is a Jewish woman by the name of Esther, who's been brought up by her uncle Mordecai. Now, the important thing to know about Mordecai and Esther is their lineage. This is what it says. There was a certain Jew, and this is in chapter 2, verse 5. there was a certain Jew in Shushan, the castle, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjaminite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives that had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah. Notice the lineage here, because it is very important. Kish was the father of Saul. And so we come to understand, even though it's not stated directly in the text, we come to understand that Mordecai and Esther are indeed descendants of King Saul. And now we come to our next character, the evil Haman. Let's see what the text says about him. This is chapter 3, verse 1. After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. Haman then is an Agagite. That is, he is a descendant of the king of the Amalekites. And so when we look at the book of Esther, it's not only the story of the salvation of the Jewish people. It is once again the story of the Israelites, particularly the house of Saul, versus the Amalekites. Haman, the son of Agag, of the house of the Amalekites. Now this time, the story will work out a little bit differently. As we know from the story, Esther becomes queen of Persia and is in great favor with her husband, Ahasuerus. Mordecai comes to her and says that Haman has promulgated a great decree against the Jews, that on the day we now celebrate Purim in Adar, all the Jews of Persia are to be murdered, thus fulfilling his role as an Amalekite. That would include, of course, Esther and Mordecai. Mordecai says to Esther something very profound, that even though Esther is afraid to go before the king without being summoned, if she does not do something, then salvation will come from another place, and she and her house will be destroyed forever. In other words, look at the example of Saul. We have an opportunity to make right what our ancestor did not do correctly. We have an opportunity to blot out Amalek. You were made queen just for this reason. And while there is no mention of God in the book of Esther directly, it is in this way that God is implied in the text. God brought you to this level to be queen so that you could fight Amalek, you could save your people and destroy Haman and his Amalekite tribe forever. And that is exactly what happens. After fasting for 3 days, Esther goes before the queen and he is indeed happy to see her. He loves her very much and looks upon her very favorably. Through a number of devices, Haman is invited to the king's palace twice for a feast. The second time, with Haman there, Esther denounces Haman and tells the king that she is a Jew and that if Haman has his way, she too will be killed because of the decree. The king is furious. He loves Esther. He walks out of the room, and Haman makes the biggest mistake of his life. He sits on Esther's couch and he touches her on the foot to beg for his life. Achashverosh comes in the room, sees Haman touching his wife, a member of his harem, strictly forbidden on pain of death, and immediately sentences Haman and his 10 children to be hung on the very same gallows that Haman had built for Esther's uncle, Mordecai. And so the story has a happy ending. Esther continues as queen. Haman is given a promotion. He becomes the prime minister of King Ahasuerus. And those who would have killed the Jews are themselves destroyed. Amalek Ahasuerus gives Mordecai a promotion, and he becomes the prime minister in Haman's place. The Jews are able to defend themselves against those who hate them, and Esther becomes the most favored queen of Ahasuerus. What are the implications of this story? Esther's courage, Esther's bravery, has her called in the literature Shoshanat Yaakov, the rose of Jacob. According to Jewish tradition, Esther becomes the mother of the next king of Persia, whose name is Cyrus. Cyrus is the king of Persia, who not only ends the exile of the Babylonian Jews, but gives permission for the temple to be rebuilt and for the walls of Jerusalem to once again be rebuilt as well. Cyrus, according to Jewish tradition, being the son of Esther, is secretly Jewish himself and allows the Jews to end the exile, return to Israel, and begin building the second Jewish Commonwealth. And so the story of Esther has more implications than costumes and groggers and shalach manot. It reminds us of the eternal battle between good and evil, between God and the enemies of the Jewish people and the enemies of people of good faith. Thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Chag Purim Sameach. May you have a happy and healthy Purim.